The most dangerous move you can make against a system built to exploit you is not to be powerful, not to resist, not to shine. It is to be boring. Yes, you heard that right. Not to be defeated, not to be broken, not to become indifferent, but to be boring. But the boredom I'm talking about here is not soullessness. It is being unpredictable, being unmeasurable, being unsolvable by algorithms, becoming useless to the system. Because they cannot sell anything to someone who doesn't want. They cannot direct someone who doesn't react. They cannot manipulate a mind that is not constantly on edge. Henry David Thoreau had realized this long before. In 1845, with an axe and a few simple tools, when he retreated to the forest by Walden Pond, people thought he was running away. But he was not running away. He was stepping outside the system. He was choosing his own battle. By the end of this text, you will see this clearly. A boring life is not the consolation of people who have lost their inspiration. It is the final move of the game, but there is a critical piece no one has told you. Behind this transformation lies a specific mental breaking point. Without it, simplicity feels like deficiency. Silence becomes unbearable. Withdrawing looks like weakness, but when that mental shift happens, you become untouchable. So why are you so tired? This is not physical. Something deeper. There is a reason you already feel exhausted the moment you open your eyes in the morning. Why does the idea of a new day sometimes feel like a burden rather than hope? You probably blamed yourself. I lack discipline. I don't sleep enough. I have no purpose. But what if the problem is not you? What if this exhaustion is not a flaw but a consequence? The system of the century no longer just wants your labor. It wants your energy, your attention, your reactions, your emotional capacity. Every notification, every wave of anger, every one more episode feeling, every endless scroll, every fear-loaded headline. These are not side effects of the modern world. These are the product itself. You are not using these platforms. They are consuming you. They taught you this. Constant stimulation equals living. A full calendar equals being valuable. Rushing around equals having purpose. That is why you chase endlessly, and you call this ambition. But pay attention. How do the people who built this order live? They send their children to schools far from technology. They retreat into silence. They acquire hobbies without screens. They read books. They think. They slow down, they sell you the chaos, while they themselves buy the calm. This is not a conspiracy. This is a confession. The same executives who design apps to maximize your screen time strictly limit their own children's access. Why? Because they know something you are only beginning to suspect. The stimulated mind is the captured mind. In 1845, Henry David Thoreau was 27 years old. He was a Harvard graduate. He could have done any respectable job. Instead, he borrowed an axe, entered the forest on land belonging to Ralph Waldo Emerson, and built a 3 by 4.5 meter cabin. One room, one door, one window on each side. He planted beans, read Homer, watched ants fight on a tree stump for hours. For his neighbors in Concord, Massachusetts, this was visible failure. A young man with potential was wasting his life, refusing to marry, refusing to acquire wealth, refusing to participate. But Thoreau was not escaping from society. He was conducting an experiment on society. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, he wrote, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. Read that again. And not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. This is not about worshiping nature. This is not about escape. A man looking at the trajectory everyone expected of him and still asking a burning question. What if most of what we call life is a sophisticated form of dying slowly? What if busyness is a socially acceptable way of avoiding the horror of existence? He spent 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days in that cabin. When he emerged, he returned not with peace, but with a weapon, a book so quiet and so savage that it has been feeding revolutions ever since. Gandhi read it. Martin Luther King Jr. studied it. This book, coming from a man who planted beans and watched ants, influenced movements across continents and centuries. Boring, unforgivably, powerfully boring. Every time you receive a notification, your prefrontal cortex activates. Dopamine levels rise. The reward mechanism kicks in. This is the same circuit structure as gambling addiction, substance addiction, any compulsive behavior. What makes you addicted is not pleasure, it is unpredictability. Slot machines do not make people addicted because they make them win. They make people addicted because they sometimes make them win. The intermittent reinforcement schedule is the most powerful behavioral conditioning tool known in psychology. Your phone is a slot machine you check 96 times a day. Apply this to your entire life. Social media, intermittent approval. News cycles, intermittent fear and relief. Work emails arriving every hour, intermittent urgency. Your nervous system is being played like an instrument, and the song it has learned is addiction. When everything is exciting, nothing is exciting. When you are exposed to constant stimulation, you lose the capacity to generate your own energy. You become not a player, but a reactor. And reactors are easy to predict, manipulate, and exploit. In ancient China, there was a philosopher named Lao Tzu. He wrote a text called the Tao Te Ching. Short passages, you can read all of it in an hour. One passage describes the usefulness of a bowl. Lao Tzu asks, what makes a bowl useful? Not the clay, the emptiness inside, the hollow space. That is where the function lives. He applies this to rooms, to wheels, to life itself. Usefulness is born from what is not there. Thoreau understood this instinctively. His entire project was about subtraction. Remove everything unnecessary until only what is needed remains. Then examine it, live from it. But what most people miss is this. This is not minimalism as an aesthetic preference. This is not clearing clutter for Instagram. This is strategic emptiness. When your life is full of obligations, stimuli, and noise, you have no capacity left to focus on what truly matters. You are so busy. You say you never take action, so busy consuming that you never create, so busy with productivity that you never actually produce anything that will outlast you. A full calendar is a trap. A packed schedule is a prison you built for yourself, and the cruel joke is that society applauds you for it. So busy must be successful. Never stops working must be important. No, being busy is often a way of hiding from this terrifying question. What would I do if I had nothing to react to? Most people don't know, and that not knowing frightens them so deeply that they fill every moment to avoid it. Thoreau spent 2 years face to face with this question. What he found there changed the world. Here is a concept you were never taught. Tolerance for boredom is a skill, and it may be the most important skill you can develop. In the 1970s, psychologist Walter Mischel conducted the famous marshmallow test. Children were given a choice, 1 marshmallow now or 2 marshmallows if they waited 15 minutes. The children who chose to wait achieved better life outcomes in almost every area: academic success, physical health, relationship stability, financial security. For decades, this was interpreted as a study on self-control, but recent research suggests something deeper. The waiting children were not simply using willpower. They had developed strategies to reframe boredom. They sang songs. They told themselves stories. They made the waiting itself interesting. They did not just resist the marshmallow. They transformed their relationship with time. What Thoreau did at Walden was the same. He did not endure the monotony of rural isolation. He rebuilt his capacity for perception. He retrained his attention so that watching the ice melt on the lake one morning became more vivid, more meaningful than years of social engagement. To be awake is to be alive, he wrote. I have never yet met a man who was quite awake. This line is an accusation. He's not talking about sleep. He is talking about the chronic distraction accepted as consciousness in most people's lives. You think you are awake. You are only stimulated. These are not the same thing. Your attention is a limited resource. You wake up with a certain cognitive capacity, a certain emotional bandwidth, a certain number of quality decisions you can make before your judgment deteriorates. This is called decision fatigue. The reserve is real, and it empties. So now the question is, who is consuming your reserve? When you check the news first thing in the morning, you are consuming. When you get swept into anger on social media, you are consuming. When you say yes to an obligation you don't actually want, you are consuming. When you make someone else's emergency your priority, you are consuming. By noon, most people are bankrupt. Fuel gone, bad decisions at the door. And what do they get in return? Nothing they chose, nothing they built, nothing they will remember a year from now. Just a series of reactions to other people's agendas. Thoreau's boring life was economically brilliant. He spent almost nothing, not money, not attention. He protected his cognitive resources the way a miser protects gold. No social obligations, no following news from distant places, no wars, no fashion trends, no gossip, no artificial urgencies, only the essential facts of life. Assembled, examined, understood, and from that protected wealth, he produced work that still yields returns nearly 2 centuries later. Here is what the system cannot tolerate: someone who does not want more. The entire mechanism of modern capitalism is built on artificial dissatisfaction. You must feel that what you have is not enough, that who you are is not enough, that where you are is not enough. Otherwise, why would you buy? Why would you scroll? Why would you chase? Satisfaction is an act of sabotage, not passive satisfaction, strategic satisfaction. Watching the maddened crowds run toward mirages and not touching them. But you plant your beans, you read your books, you think your thoughts, and the system cannot touch you because you have stepped out of the game you were supposed to play. In another essay, Thoreau wrote, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." But notice, he did not say they were forced into it. They are living these lives themselves. Active verb. They choose this every day by default. Desperation is not imposed from outside. It is an inside job. There's a modern pathology Thoreau never saw but somehow diagnosed in advance. It is called the paradox of choice. Too many options paralyze instead of liberate. But I want to go to a darker point than this. Options are not only paralyzing, they are expensive. Every option you keep open consumes your mental space. Every possibility you refuse to close burns background processing power. Every maybe later or I'll keep my options open is a small leak in your cognitive fuel tank. Some successful people understand this instinctively. That is why many of them wear the same clothes every day, eliminate small decisions, preserve resources for what matters, but they have only solved half of the equation. The truly wise go further. They eliminate not just small decisions, but entire life categories that do not serve their core purpose. At Walden, Thoreau did not just simplify his wardrobe, he simplified his existence. What are the essential facts of life? He asked, and then he cut everything else. Not later, not gradually, immediately. 1 room, beans and rice, a few books, silence. He did not keep options open. He deliberately burned them because he had understood something our culture refuses to accept. Keeping options open is a form of cowardice dressed as wisdom. When you keep all doors open, you pass through none of them. You stand in the corridor forever congratulating yourself on your flexibility, while life is lived in the rooms. In 1846, 1 year into the Walden experiment, Thoreau was walking to town to pick up a repaired shoe. On the road, he was stopped by local tax collector Sam Staples. Thoreau had 6 years of unpaid poll tax, about $1.50, almost nothing. Staples asked him to pay. Thoreau refused. His reason had nothing to do with lack of money. The taxes were funding slavery and the war against Mexico, which Thoreau saw as an unjust war. He would not participate, not even indirectly, not even symbolically. Staples, who liked Thoreau, offered to pay the tax himself to avoid the paperwork. Thoreau refused that too. They arrested him and threw him in the town jail. He spent one night there. His aunt probably paid the tax on his behalf and against his wishes. He was released the next morning. He picked up his shoes and walked back to the pond as if nothing had happened. But that one night did not end there. That short time in prison ignited an idea. That idea became a text. That text created a chain reaction. It inspired Mahatma Gandhi's Salt March, Martin Luther King Jr.'s Montgomery bus boycott, and the anti-apartheid resistance. All of it started with one man refusing to yield over a small sum of money. This is not the story of someone escaping life. This is not the weakness of someone who withdrew. This is the story of someone whose principles are so clear that controlling him becomes impossible. Not through force, not through pressure, not through persuasion, only through refusal. But a true refusal is never random. It only becomes possible when you have cleared the excess from your life. When your needs decrease, the power others hold over you decreases too. Henry David Thoreau measured his very life by this understanding. He wrote down his expenses one by one, every penny, the cost of his cabin, the food he ate, the true price of living. And what emerged was astonishing. The things a human being truly needs were far fewer than imagined. What remained? Anxieties that looked like necessities. Status games presented as obligations. Fears packaged as ambition. And then he wrote this sentence: "The cost of a thing is the amount of what I will call life which is required to be exchanged for it." Stop and think about this for a moment. Not money, not even time. Your life. That house you pay for by working 60 hours a week, what is it truly costing you? How many years of your life are you giving for those few square meters? That promotion you are chasing, what is it truly earning you? More responsibility, less freedom, more pressure, less breath, and you can shatter all of this complexity with a single question. Is what you are gaining worth the life you are giving? Most people never ask this question because they know deep down what the answer might be. Your brain has two fundamental modes: focused mode, thinking, active attention, problem solving, learning. Default mode. What happens when you are not focused on anything specific? Daydreaming, mind wandering, staring out the window. Modern productivity culture glorifies the focused mode. Every minute must be optimized. Every gap must be filled. Podcast in the car, audiobook on the walk, social media while waiting in line. But research shows this: your most creative insights come from the default mode. When your mind wanders, your brain begins connecting disparate ideas, synthesizing, making leaps that focused attention cannot. Every great creative breakthrough in history has been preceded by periods of apparently doing nothing. Newton under the apple tree, Archimedes in the bath, Darwin on long walks, Einstein on his bicycle. Boredom is not the absence of productivity. It is the prerequisite of deep productivity. While Thoreau stared at the pond for hours, he was not wasting time. He was creating the mental space in which Walden could emerge, in which civil disobedience could crystallize. His boring life produced more lasting value than thousands of busy executives who cannot sit still for 10 minutes. There is a psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. The level of stimulation you are accustomed to becomes your new baseline. What is exciting becomes normal. What is extraordinary becomes ordinary. That is why lottery winners return to their baseline happiness level within a year. The excitement of a new car passes. The dream house becomes just a house, but there is also a dark side no one talks about. The treadmill runs both ways. If you constantly increase stimulation, you need more stimulation to feel anything. You are not becoming more alive. you are becoming more numb. You are raising the threshold until only extreme experiences are even perceived. That is why thrill seekers need bigger thrills, why social media users drift toward more extreme content, why people in chaos become addicted to chaos even when they say they want peace. They have conditioned themselves to need catastrophe in order to feel. Thoreau reversed the experiment. By radically reducing stimulation, he lowered his hedonic baseline. He recalibrated himself until a sunrise became miraculous, until the sound of ice cracking on the pond became symphonic, until ordinary existence became vivid. He did not escape life. He intensified it by removing the noise. Something about how Thoreau is usually presented bothers me. They make him a nature poet, a gentle eccentric, a man who loved trees. They domesticate him, they sand him smooth, they turn him into a greeting card. But Thoreau was radical in the original Latin sense. Root. He went to the roots of things, and what he found there was disturbing. He found that much of what we call society is a conspiracy of distraction. That much of what we call success is a more sophisticated form of slavery. That much of what we call life is a rehearsal that never becomes a performance. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, he wrote, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. This is not permission to be eccentric. This is a diagnosis. If you are out of sync, perhaps you are not broken. Perhaps you are the only one hearing the real music beneath the noise everyone else is marching to. There is a concept in military strategy, strategic withdrawal. This is not fleeing. It is certainly not defeat. This is consciously stepping back. An army sometimes abandons the battlefield, not because it is afraid, but to move to stronger ground, to gather its resources, to allow the enemy to advance uncontrolled, to exhaust itself, and then, at the right moment, from the right place, to respond with concentrated force. What Henry David Thoreau did was exactly this. He withdrew from the battlefield the society had imposed. He refused to play by their rules. He stopped competing for their rewards. He withdrew, but he did not shrink. Instead, he simplified, he gathered, he strengthened. And from that small cabin, from that silent forest, he launched one of the most powerful attacks ever made against an order no one even noticed. We still feel its effect today because a boring life is not the extinction of ambition. It is ambition in its purified form, not for more, but for deeper, not more, but for what is more real. Actually, you already know this. A part of you recognized this long ago. You felt the exhaustion of the endless race. The days that looked full but felt hollow, that strange deficiency that nothing could quite satisfy. That feeling is your compass. But there is an abyss between knowing something and living it. Most people linger in this gap and never escape it. Henry David Thoreau crossed that line, not because he was special, but because he did not deny what he saw, and because he was stubborn enough to do what it required. Now ask yourself this question. Not immediately. Take days if needed. Remove everything you do out of habit. Remove what you do out of fear. Remove what you chose by imitating others. What remains? When you remove everything you say, I have to do this, what remains? That remaining thing, whatever survives the subtraction, is your real life. Most people never reach it. They linger in the corridor, but never enter any room. Thoreau walked through that door. For 2 years, 2 months, 2 days, he lived inside the life he had chosen, and what he found there is still rippling outward. Because a simple life is not simple because it is easy. It is simple because everything unnecessary has been cut away. Only what truly matters remains, but making that cut requires courage. It requires being willing to be misunderstood. It requires accepting the label of boring or failed, and most importantly, it requires following that voice coming from within, however far away it sounds, however faintly it is heard, however frightening it may be. Now the real question is this: will you also cross that threshold? However loud or quiet that voice may be, however frightening it may be, the real question now is this: will you also cross that threshold?